Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we continue to follow the latest developments in the haunting and heartbreaking story of Hung and Hoai, revolving around the mysterious disappearance of Hung's mother, an ordeal that has plunged his entire family into long days filled with anxiety, despair, and painful waiting. In previous episodes, viewers witnessed how tragedy slowly enveloped this small family. Driven by dire circumstances and left with no other way to cover daily expenses and survive, Hung's mother was forced to turn to a loan shark. At first, the amount was not large, but in a short time, with interest compounding upon interest, the debt ballooned at an alarming rate, climbing to nearly 100 million dong. The crushing burden fell on the shoulders of an aging woman, condemning her to days of constant unease, living in fear of threatening phone calls and intimidating visits from debt collectors. Unable to endure the relentless pressure and threats any longer, Hung's mother was compelled to meet them again at the old rendezvous, the same place where previous transactions had taken place. Deep down, she only hoped to ask for a little more time, clinging to the hope of buying a few extra days for her son to find a solution. However, the meeting did not unfold as she had hoped. After only a few tense exchanges, the argument escalated quickly, words growing harsher, the atmosphere heavy and suffocating. Fear was etched clearly across the elderly woman's face, while the debt collectors, impatient and ruthless, stared back with cold, aggressive eyes. The confrontation soon spiraled out of control. In a brief, terrifying moment on a deserted road, Hung's mother was violently assaulted. She had no chance to resist, managing only a desperate cry for help. But that faint plea was swallowed by the emptiness around her. No one heard it, no one came to her aid. She was beaten unconscious and dragged away, leaving behind a cold, silent road and an uncertain fate. From that moment on, Hung's mother completely lost contact, as if she had vanished from the lives of those who loved her most. Elsewhere, unable to reach his mother, Hung began to feel a growing sense of dread. Unanswered calls and a house shut tight in eerie silence left him overwhelmed with fear. At the same time, Hoai was consumed by worry as well, sensing that something terribly wrong had happened. Even so, the two tried to remain calm, scrambling everywhere to gather money. After days of borrowing and pleading with acquaintances, they finally managed to raise 80 million dong, the amount they hoped would settle the debt and bring Hung's mother home safely. Yet when Hung and Hoai arrived with the money, the familiar house remained tightly closed, cold and frighteningly quiet. No one in the neighborhood knew where she had gone, and no one had seen her since that fateful day. A hollow sense of confusion and despair enveloped the couple. At that moment, the money in their hands seemed to lose all meaning, because what they needed most was news of Hung's mother and her safety, something they still could not grasp. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, Hung's mother lay unconscious in the poor home of a stranger. An elderly woman, who had stumbled upon her in a state of utter exhaustion, could not bear to abandon her. She brought Hung's mother home, caring for her devotedly and preparing herbal remedies in the hope of reviving her. Despite her own limited means, the old woman did everything she could, watching over her day and night, wiping her face, and feeding her spoonfuls of medicine. Yet 2 days passed, and Hung's mother still did not regain consciousness. Her body remained frail, her breathing faint, lying motionless on the old, worn bed. The poor old woman could only sigh and worry, tending to her while praying for a miracle. Little did she know that elsewhere, the woman's son and daughter-in-law were enduring agonizing hours of despair, counting every second as they waited desperately for news of their missing mother. 2 lives, 2 different places, bound together by the same heavy, silent weight that continued to stretch on endlessly. As someone who works in the field, Hung understood better than anyone the familiar rules of life, and the suspicious gaps that sometimes lie behind them. He knew that at times, silence could simply mean delays, technical issues, or very ordinary reasons. But shaped by years of professional experience, he also understood something else just as clearly: some silences should not last too long. And this silence, to him, was completely abnormal. It carried a heavy sense of unease, like a quiet yet haunting warning sign that kept stirring turmoil in his heart. Unable to wait any longer, Hung immediately called on other family members to help with the search. He knew that the longer time passed, the slimmer the hope became, and that every minute of hesitation could push things further beyond control. Lythieuca arrived quickly, her face showing clear signs of anxiety mixed with confusion. With her was Hoai, Lythieuca's boyfriend, a young but composed CEO, who did not hesitate for a second and immediately joined everyone in dividing up the tasks. No one spoke much. A single glance was enough for everyone to understand that they all shared the same worry and one single goal: to find Hung's mother. The group spread out across familiar routes, narrow alleys, bustling markets that gradually grew quieter, bus stations noisy by day but eerily cold as evening fell, and even the old meeting spot where Hung's mother might have been. Each location carried a fragile thread of hope, only to be quickly replaced by disappointment when no clues emerged. Their footsteps kept moving without pause, even as exhaustion slowly became visible on each face. Time slipped by in silence. From afternoon to evening, the sky darkened quickly, streetlights flickering on and casting their glow over long, empty streets. Even when night had fully fallen, no one wanted to go home. Fatigue could not overpower the anxiety gnawing at their thoughts. Everyone understood that as long as they kept searching, there was still hope, no matter how fragile that hope might be. Hung's mother's phone remained switched off. Each time Hung dialed, each time the screen displayed the message that the call could not be connected, his heart tightened once more. A sense of helplessness crept in, filling him with fear and self-blame, as if being just one step too late might mean missing something critically important. He tried to stay calm, but deep inside, his fear continued to grow with every unanswered call. Throughout the search, Hoai walked quietly beside her husband. She did not cry, nor did she speak much. She simply stayed close, matching Hung's every step. Her hand clasped his tightly, a gentle yet firm grip, as if to pass him a little warmth and strength. In that moment, Hoai feared that if she let go even once, everything they were desperately holding onto would collapse completely. Her silence was not indifference, but worry carefully hidden, a quiet companionship during the most fragile hours of their lives. Hung didn't hesitate any longer. After weighing everything that had happened, he made the decision to report the case to the local police. This was no longer a choice filled with doubt, it had become a necessary step, because all signs pointed to something far beyond an ordinary loss of contact. In Hung's heart, worry had shifted into a sharp, undeniable sense of danger, pushing him to act faster and more decisively before it was too late. This time, with a series of abnormal signs clearly presented, and with the history of his mother being repeatedly threatened over debt, the case was quickly accepted by the police as an emergency. What Hung provided wasn't just a story of unanswered calls or his mother's strange absence, but an entire chain of events leading up to it: the borrowing of money, the mounting pressure, and the fateful meeting at the old location. Together, they formed an alarming picture, serious enough for authorities to recognize the gravity of the situation immediately. Right after receiving the report, the police moved into action. The atmosphere at the station became tense and urgent. Officers rapidly reviewed the information, assigned tasks, and mobilized K-9 units to join the search. With experience handling similar cases, they understood that even the smallest detail could become a critical clue. Time was now the deciding factor, and not a single minute could be wasted. Using security camera footage from surrounding roads, the police gradually identified Hung's mother's last known direction of movement. The images were blurry and brief, capturing only fleeting glimpses of her figure on the street, but they were enough to narrow down the area that needed focused searching. Each segment of footage was replayed again and again, every frame paused, zoomed in, and carefully analyzed, as if missing one tiny detail could break the entire trail of evidence. At the same time, alongside tracking the camera trail, the police quickly went to the home of the lone shark, the person believed to be directly connected to Hung's mother's last meeting. However, when officers arrived, the house was sealed shut, with no sign of anyone living there. Neighbors said the man had left earlier, no one knew where he went, and nobody could reach him. His sudden disappearance from the area only deepened suspicion, making the case even more complicated and tense. The lone shark's vanishing cast a heavy shadow over everyone. For Hung, it wasn't just troubling information, it felt like proof that the fear he had carried for so long might be turning into reality. Every step of the investigation opened a new spark of hope, but also dragged in new waves of worry. In that moment, the only thing he could cling to was the police's determined involvement, praying that from these few fragile clues, the truth about his mother would soon be revealed. Hung didn't hesitate any longer. After weighing everything that had happened, he made the decision to report the case to the local police. This was no longer a choice filled with doubt, it was a necessary step, because every sign indicated that the situation had gone beyond the limits of an ordinary loss of contact. In Hung's heart, worry had turned into a distinct sense of danger, urging him to act faster and more decisively before everything became too late. This time, with a series of unusual signs clearly presented, and with the history of his mother being repeatedly threatened over debt, the case was quickly received by the police as an emergency. The information Hung provided wasn't just about unanswered calls or his mother's abnormal disappearance, but an entire chain of events leading up to it, the borrowing of money, the mounting pressure, and the fateful meeting at the old location. All of it formed an alarming picture, serious enough for the authorities to recognize the gravity of the situation. Immediately after taking the report, the police moved into action. The atmosphere at the station became more urgent than ever. Officers swiftly reviewed the details, assigned tasks, and mobilized K-9 units to assist in the search. With experience handling similar cases, they understood that even the smallest detail could become a crucial clue. Time was now the deciding factor, and not a single minute could be wasted. Using security camera footage from surrounding roads, the police gradually identified Hung's mother's last known direction of movement. The images were blurry and brief, capturing only short moments of her figure on the street, but they were enough to narrow down the area that needed focused searching. Each segment of footage was replayed again and again, every frame paused, zoomed in, and carefully analyzed, as if missing even one small detail could break the entire chain of clues. At the same time, alongside tracing the camera trail, the police quickly went to the home of the lone shark, the person believed to be directly connected to Hung's mother's last meeting. However, when officers arrived, the house was tightly shut, with no sign of anyone living there. Neighbors said the man had already left earlier, no one knew where he had gone, and nobody could reach him. His escape from the area only increased suspicion, making the case even more complicated and tense. The lone shark's disappearance cast a heavy shadow over everyone. For Hung, it wasn't just troubling news, it was a sign that the fear he had carried for so long might be turning into reality. Every step of the investigation brought a new spark of hope, but also dragged in new waves of worry. In that moment, all he could do was cling to the police's determined efforts, hoping that from these few fragile clues, the truth about his mother would soon be revealed. After a period of tracking the scent, the K-9 units suddenly changed direction, pulling the entire search team into a narrow, deserted road with very little foot traffic. The road stretched ahead in an eerie stillness, lined with dense bushes on both sides. Tire marks were scarce, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. With every step deeper into the area, the weight of worry pressed heavier on everyone's hearts, as if an ominous premonition was slowly turning into reality. At the roadside, amid layers of dust and wild grass, the search team abruptly stopped. Lying quietly under the beam of a flashlight was a familiar hair clip, small, yet haunting. It was the very clip Hung's mother used to wear. Before anyone could recover from that discovery, their eyes caught sight of something else that made their hearts tighten: the pair of sandals belonging to Hung's mother, flung to the side of the road, left abandoned like the last traces of her presence. In that moment, the air seemed to freeze. Tieu San could no longer hold herself together. A wail of despair burst from her lips. She collapsed beside the sandals, her trembling hands clutching them as if they were the final thread holding her hope together. Tears streamed down uncontrollably, mixed with overwhelming fear and pain. Before her eyes, those were no longer lifeless sandals, but the image of her beloved aunt facing an unimaginable danger. Hung stood frozen just behind her. His face turned pale, his eyes empty as they stared at what lay at his feet. In that instant, it felt as though all emotion had been drained from him. He no longer had the strength to cry, nor could he utter a single word. His chest felt tightly constricted, his breathing so heavy that simply remaining on his feet required immense effort. Deep down, he understood more clearly than ever that the thing he feared most was no longer just a possibility. Everyone present silently understood the same truth, even though no one dared to say it aloud. The signs left behind were too clear, too heartbreaking. Something terrible had happened to Hung's mother. That realization cut through each person like a cold blade, making the already silent surroundings grow suffocatingly heavy. Meanwhile, in a completely different place, Hung's mother was still lying on an old bed in the humble home of the elderly woman who had sheltered her over the past few days. After 3 long days in a coma, she finally stirred. Her exhausted eyes slowly opened, her gaze clouded and confused, as if she could not yet comprehend where she was. The poor old woman froze for a brief second, then burst into tears of joy. She hurried forward, gently helping Hung's mother sit up, her hands trembling with emotion. The old woman quickly brought some water, carefully supporting her as she sipped small mouthfuls. Hung's mother was still extremely weak, her body limp, her breathing faint. She tried to move her lips, but no words came out. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion and panic, as if she were searching for something familiar amid the chaos of her memory. All the old woman could do was hold her hand and soothe her with gentle words, even knowing that the woman before her could not yet respond. Seeing how frail Hung's mother was, the old woman realized she could not keep this secret any longer. Despite her own poverty, she made a firm decision. The next day, she would report the situation to the local authorities. She believed that only then could Hung's mother be reunited with her family and find her way home. In that small house, beneath the dim glow of a flickering light, 2 strangers' lives became unexpectedly intertwined, both waiting for a new day, one in which truth and hope might finally find their way back. The final clues have emerged, yet the truth remains shrouded by countless unanswered gaps. On one side lies the deserted road, marked by a discarded hair clip and a pair of abandoned sandals, where the despair of Hung and his family has nearly reached its breaking point. On the other side stands a quiet, impoverished home, where Hung's mother has just awakened after days in a coma, frail and still unable to speak, while a fragile spark of hope is being kept alive by the kindness of a stranger. 2 places, 2 destinies, seemingly worlds apart, yet slowly converging toward the same point. Will the authorities be able to trace the culprit behind this tragedy? Will Hung's mother regain enough strength to recount what truly happened, allowing the truth to come to light? And will the long-awaited reunion that the family has been praying for finally arrive, or do even more painful trials still lie ahead? What will happen next? Stay tuned for the next episode.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Cho em mượn cái mũ mà đau quá. Mình đang làm video đây mọi người ơi. có thể hoàn thành video sớm nhất có thể. Mình sẽ đăng tải vào buổi sáng. Mình nghĩ là mình sẽ đăng tải vào tối nay hoặc sáng ngày mai. Cảm ơn mọi người đã theo dõi và ủng hộ cho video của mình nhé. Tạm biệt mọi người. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo.